Morning chaos on Michigan Avenue. Jasmine Brooks stood at the crosswalk on Michigan Avenue, her oversized canvas bag digging into her shoulder as she balanced her laptop case and a steaming cup of hazelnut coffee. The Chicago morning was already buzzing with energy. Commuters rushed past her, taxis honked impatiently. And somewhere nearby, a street musician played saxophone with more enthusiasm than skill. She glanced at her phone, cursing under her breath. Late again. Her client presentation was in 30 minutes, and she still needed to grab those printed mock-ups from the office. The light turned green, and Jasmine stepped off the curb, her eyes fixed on her phone screen as she replied to an urgent email from her boss. The screech of tires snapped her attention upward. A sleek black Tesla came speeding around the corner, stopping just inches from her body. Jasmine stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. The coffee cup flew from her hand in a perfect arc, and she watched in slow motion as the dark liquid splashed across the hood of the expensive car. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped the most irritatingly handsome man Jasmine had ever laid eyes on. Tall, with dark hair styled in that effortlessly perfect way that probably required an expensive stylist, wearing a suit that screamed wealth and privilege. His sharp jawline tightened as he stared at the coffee dripping down his windshield. "Are you kidding me?" Jasmine shouted, her fear quickly transforming into rage. "You almost killed me." The man's gray eyes fixed on her with an expression of pure annoyance. "Maybe if you weren't glued to your phone while crossing the street, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Maybe if you weren't driving like you own the entire city, I wouldn't have nearly died." Jasmine shot back, her hands shaking with adrenaline. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" He walked around the front of his car, surveying the coffee damage with the kind of disdain usually reserved for major catastrophes. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs? I don't care if it costs $1 million. You don't get to risk people's lives because you're late to some fancy business meeting." Jasmine crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Actually, it costs considerably more than $1 million. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped at a spot on his sleeve where coffee had splattered. "And for your information, I had the right of way." "You had the right of way?" Jasmine's voice rose an octave. "I was in the crosswalk. With the light, you came flying around that corner like you were racing in the Grand Prix." A small crowd had begun to gather, phones raised to capture the confrontation. The man noticed, and his expression hardened further. "Listen, I don't have time for this drama," he said coldly. "I have an actual important meeting to attend. Unlike some people who apparently have nothing better to do than stand in the middle of the street causing problems." "Causing problems?" Jasmine stepped closer, her finger jabbing toward his chest. "You're the problem. People like you, who think money gives you the right to do whatever you want, treat everyone else like we're invisible. And people like you," he countered, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm tone, "love to play the victim. Always looking for someone to blame for your own carelessness. I was not careless. You were reckless. Agree to disagree." He turned back toward his car. "Next time, watch where you're going. Next time, try being a decent human being." Jasmine called after him. He paused, hand on the car door, and looked back at her with a smirk that made her blood boil. "Trust me, sweetheart. I'm doing humanity a favor by removing myself from your presence. The feeling is completely mutual, jerk." He climbed into his Tesla and drove away, leaving Jasmine standing on the sidewalk. Trembling with rage and surrounded by curious onlookers, someone handed her phone back to her. She hadn't even realized she'd dropped it. "You okay, miss?" an elderly woman asked kindly. "I'm fine," Jasmine muttered, though she felt anything but fine. Just another entitled rich guy who thinks the world revolves around him. She bent down to pick up her empty coffee cup, noticing her hands were still shaking. That man. That insufferable, arrogant, ridiculously attractive man. She hoped with every fiber of her being that she would never have to see his face again. An unexpected phone call Jasmine made it to her presentation 15 minutes late. Caulfield's, still fuming. Somehow she managed to pull herself together enough to pitch her designs. But her mind kept wandering back to the confrontation. The way he'd looked at her like she was an inconvenience. the dismissive tone in his voice. She was packing up her materials when her phone rang. Mom flashed across the screen. "Hey, Mom. Kind of a bad time," Jasmine answered, wedging the phone between her shoulder and ear. "Jasmine Marie Brooks, you need to hear this right now." Her mother's voice vibrated with barely contained excitement. Jasmine froze. That tone never meant anything good. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything terrible, sweetheart. I did something wonderful." "Do you remember my college roommate, Patricia Ashford?" "Vaguely. Why?" "Well, Patricia and I have stayed close all these years, and we've been talking about how perfect you and her son would be together." Jasmine's stomach dropped. "Mom, please tell me you didn't." "We arranged for you to meet him. Isn't that exciting? He's successful, handsome, comes from a good family. Dominic is exactly the kind of man you should be dating." "Dominic," Jasmine repeated slowly. "Dominic Ashford." "Yes." "Oh, you've heard of him? See, this is meant to be. Patricia says he runs some big technology company. Very impressive young man." Jasmine sank into the nearest chair. The universe could not be this cruel. "What exactly did you arrange, Mom?" "Dinner at the Ashford estate this Friday at 7. Patricia and I will be there too, of course, just to help break the ice. But we'll give you two plenty of time to get to know each other." "Mom, I can't make it Friday. I have plans." "Cancel them. This is important, Jasmine. You're 27 years old. Don't you want to settle down? Have a family? I want to make my own choices about who I date. Look how well that's worked out so far." Her mother's voice softened. "Honey, I'm not trying to control your life. I just want you to be happy. And Patricia assures me that Dominic is wonderful once you get to know him. He's just been so focused on his career that he hasn't had time to meet the right woman. Maybe he's just impossible to be around," Jasmine muttered. "What was that?" "Nothing. Fine, I'll come to dinner on Friday." "That's my girl." "Oh, this is so exciting. I have such a good feeling about this." Jasmine hung up and stared at her phone in disbelief. Of all the people in Chicago, her mother had set her up with him. The man who'd nearly run her over. The arrogant jerk in the expensive car. This was going to be a disaster. Dominic's day gets worse across town. Dominic Ashford sat in his corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, trying to focus on the quarterly reports in front of him. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman from this morning. The way she'd stood there, fearless and furious, calling him out without a hint of intimidation. Most people cowered when they realized who he was. She hadn't cared about his money or his status. She just cared that he'd been driving recklessly, which, if he was being honest with himself, he had been. His phone buzzed with his mother's ringtone. He considered letting it go to voicemail, but Patricia Ashford had a way of making his life miserable when he ignored her calls. "Hello, Mother. Finally, I've been trying to reach you all morning. I've been in meetings. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything is right. I have the most wonderful news." Dominic's grip tightened on his phone. His mother's wonderful news usually meant something terrible for him. "I'm listening. You know my dear friend Catherine Brooks from college?" "Not really. But continue." "Well, Catherine has a daughter who's absolutely perfect for you. She's intelligent, creative, independent. And she's single. We've arranged for you to meet her this Friday." "You arranged what?" "A dinner. Here at the house. Don't worry. Catherine and I will be there to help facilitate conversation. We're thinking this could be the beginning of something beautiful." Dominic closed his eyes, a headache forming behind his temples. "Mother, I've told you 1,000,000 times. I don't need you setting me up on dates. I'm perfectly capable of meeting women on my own, and yet you haven't. Dominic, you're 32 years old. You spend all your time working. When was the last time you went on an actual date?" "Last month. That networking dinner doesn't count. I mean a real date with a woman you're interested in." Dominic couldn't actually remember. "I'm focused on building my company." "Company's built, darling. You're a billionaire several times over. It's time to focus on building a life. Don't you want a family someday?" "Eventually, yes, but on my own terms. Friday at 7. Her name is Jasmine, and I expect you to be charming." "Mother, I can't. I have plans." "Cancel them." This is important. Patricia's voice took on that steel edge that meant the conversation was over. I've already told Catherine you'll be there. Don't embarrass me. The line went dead. Dominic stared at his phone, then at the city sprawling below him. Somewhere out there was a woman named Jasmine, who his mother thought would be perfect for him. He'd go to this ridiculous dinner, be polite for an hour, and then make it clear to both his mother and her friend that arranged setups were not his style. How bad could one dinner be? The dinner of Doom Friday evening arrived far too quickly for Jasmine's liking. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, changing outfits for the fourth time. The black dress felt too formal. The jeans and blouse too casual. She finally settled on a burgundy-wrapped dress that struck a balance between effort and indifference. This is ridiculous, she muttered to her reflection. I'm dressing up to have dinner with the most obnoxious man I've ever met. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Catherine was on her way to pick her up, which meant Jasmine had exactly 15 minutes to mentally prepare for the worst evening of her life. The Ashford estate was located in Lincoln Park, a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged in a historical architecture magazine. As Catherine pulled up the circular driveway, Jasmine's stomach twisted into knots. Isn't it beautiful? Catherine gushed. Patricia has always had such exquisite taste. It's very nice. Mom? Jasmine smoothed down her dress, taking a deep breath. Patricia Ashford greeted them at the door. An elegant woman in her late 50s, with perfectly styled silver hair and a warm smile. Catherine. And you must be Jasmine. Oh, you're even more beautiful than your mother described. Thank you, Mrs. Ashford. Your home is stunning. Please call me Patricia. Come in, come in. Dominic should be down any moment. He's just finishing up a work call. They were led into a sitting room that looked like something out of a luxury magazine. Cream-colored furniture, original artwork on the walls, and a chandelier that probably cost more than Jasmine's annual salary. Can I get you ladies something to drink? Wine? Champagne? Wine would be lovely, Catherine said, practically vibrating with excitement. Jasmine was about to respond when she heard footsteps on the marble staircase. She turned toward the sound, and her heart stopped. Dominic Ashford stood frozen on the bottom step, his expression mirroring her own shock. You, they said simultaneously. Patricia looked between them, confused. Oh, do you two already know each other? How wonderful. Know each other. Jasmine's voice came out higher than intended. This is the man who almost ran me over on Monday. Catherine's face paled. What? And this, Dominic said, his jaw tight, is the woman who threw coffee all over my car and caused a scene in the middle of Michigan Avenue. You caused the scene by driving like a maniac. Jasmine shot back. I was not driving like a maniac. You were jaywalking. I was in the crosswalk. Both of you, stop. Patricia held up her hands, her voice firm but confused. What on earth is going on? Jasmine and Dominic glared at each other across the sitting room. Years of tension somehow compressed into 5 days of mutual dislike. Catherine spoke first, her voice shaking slightly. Jasmine, honey, maybe you should explain what happened. Mom, some jerk in a Tesla nearly hit me, and when I confronted him about his reckless driving, he acted like I was the problem. Jasmine crossed her arms. I had no idea that jerk was the wonderful Dominic you'd been telling me about, Dominic. Patricia turned to her son. Is this true? Dominic ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. There was an incident on Monday. I was running late to a meeting. A woman stepped into the intersection. I stopped in time and she overreacted. Overreacted. Jasmine's voice rose. You almost killed me. I stopped the car. You were never in any real danger. You just wanted someone to blame for your own carelessness. My carelessness? You came flying around that corner without even looking. I had the right of way. Oh, here we go again with the right of way nonsense. Patricia and Catherine exchanged worried glances. Perhaps, Patricia said carefully, we should all sit down and have a calm discussion about this. There's nothing to discuss, Jasmine said firmly. I'm not having dinner with someone who thinks traffic laws don't apply to him, and I'm not wasting my evening with someone who's determined to be offended by everything, Dominic countered. Then we agree on something. Jasmine grabbed her purse. Mom, can we please go? Jasmine Marie Brooks, sit down this instant. Catherine's voice held a tone Jasmine hadn't heard since she was 16. Patricia and I have spent weeks planning this evening. The least you can do is stay for dinner. Catherine's right, Patricia added, giving Dominic a pointed look. You're both adults. Surely you can set aside this misunderstanding for one meal. Jasmine and Dominic continued, glaring at each other. Fine, Jasmine said through gritted teeth. One meal. Fine, Dominic echoed. A meal built on tension dinner was served in the formal dining room, space that could easily seat 20 people. The four of them sat clustered at one end of the long mahogany table. Jasmine directly across from Dominic, their mothers seated at either end, like referees at a boxing match. The first course arrived. A delicate butternut squash soup that Jasmine barely tasted. She was too focused on not making eye contact with Dominic. So, Jasmine, Patricia said brightly, clearly trying to salvage the evening. Your mother tells me you're a graphic designer. That must be so creative. It is. I work for a small agency downtown. We handle branding and marketing campaigns for local businesses. How nice. Dominic's company works with a lot of creative professionals. Perhaps you two have that in common. I seriously doubt it, Jasmine muttered, taking a sip of wine. What was that, dear? I said, that's interesting. Dominic cut into his soup with more force than necessary. My company develops software solutions for corporations. We occasionally work with marketing teams, but I wouldn't say creativity is our primary focus. That's obvious, Jasmine said sweetly. You seem more like a numbers and logic kind of person. Not much room for imagination. His eyes flashed, and you seem like the type who thinks feelings should trump facts. Feelings keep people human. You should try having some sometime. Catherine laughed nervously. Kids, please. Let's keep this civil. The main course arrived, perfectly cooked salmon with roasted vegetables. Patricia launched into a story about a charity gala she was planning, clearly trying to redirect the conversation to safer ground. Jasmine forced herself to smile and nod at the appropriate moments, but she could feel Dominic's gaze on her. When she finally looked up, he was studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked, more defensively than intended. Nothing. I'm just trying to figure out how my mother thought we'd be compatible. Trust me. I'm wondering the same thing about my mother's judgment, although Dominic continued. Leaning back in his chair, you do have an interesting way of expressing yourself. Very passionate? Is that your way of calling me dramatic? I'm saying you don't hold back. Most people in my world are too concerned with appearances to be genuinely honest. Jasmine blinked, surprised by the compliment hidden in his words. Well, you're definitely honest about being arrogant. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. And you're honest about being stubborn. I prefer determined. I prefer confident. They stared at each other across the table, and something shifted. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt dangerously close to interest. See? Catherine clapped her hands together. You're having a conversation. That's progress. Patricia beamed. I knew you two would find common ground. Jasmine and Dominic broke eye contact, both reaching for their wine glasses simultaneously. After dinner, Patricia suggested they take coffee in the library while the mothers discussed wedding venues in the sitting room. Wedding venues? Jasmine hissed as they walked down the hallway. They've known each other for one dinner, half of which we spent arguing. My mother doesn't believe in wasting time, Dominic said dryly. Once she gets an idea in her head, she's relentless. The library was massive, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture that probably cost more than Jasmine's car. Dominic poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver service and handed one to her. So, he said, settling into an armchair, this is awkward. Understatement of the century. Jasmine sat on the couch across from him, cradling her coffee cup. My mother has been planning this for weeks. She's not going to let it go easily. Neither is mine. She's already talking about introducing us to her friends at some charity event next month. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the situation. We could just tell them the truth, Jasmine suggested. That we can't stand each other, and this whole thing is a disaster. We could. Dominic studied his coffee, but that won't stop them. They'll just try harder to convince us we're wrong about each other. So what do you suggest? We fake it. Jasmine looked up sharply. What? We pretend to go along with this. Let them think we're giving it a chance. We go on a few public dates, act civil in front of our mothers, and then in a month or so, we mutually decide we're not compatible. Clean break. Everyone saves face. You want a fake date? It's better than dealing with my mother's disappointment and constant setup attempts for the next year. Trust me, if we just refuse, she'll make both our lives miserable. Jasmine considered this. As much as she hated to admit it, he had a point. Her mother had been increasingly worried about her single status. If Jasmine just refused this setup, Catherine would probably arrange 10 more. How would this even work? She asked cautiously. We established some ground rules. Public appearances only, no actual relationship stuff. Just enough to convince our mothers we're trying. And after a month, we tell them it didn't work out. We wanted different things. Incompatible life goals. Whatever sounds believable. Jasmine took a sip of her coffee, thinking, this is insane. Completely insane, Dominic agreed. But it might actually work. Fine, but I have conditions. I'd expect nothing less. First, no pretending in private. When it's just us, we're honest about how ridiculous this is. Agreed. Second, we split all costs for these fake dates. I'm not letting you pay for everything just because you're wealthy. Dominic raised an eyebrow. That's an unusual condition, but okay. Third, when we end this, it's mutual. No one gets blamed. We both agree it didn't work out. Deal. Dominic stood and extended his hand. Partners in deception? Jasmine stood and shook his hand, ignoring the spark of electricity that shot through her palm. Partners in deception. The first performance the following week, Jasmine found herself getting ready for their first official fake date. Dominic had suggested the Art Institute, a public venue where they'd likely be seen by people who knew their mothers. He picked her up in a different car this time, a silver Audi that was only moderately ostentatious. No Tesla today? Jasmine asked as she buckled her seatbelt. I thought it might bring back traumatic memories, he said with a slight smile. They drove to the museum in surprisingly comfortable silence. Jasmine had expected more awkwardness, but Dominic seemed content to just drive, occasionally pointing out landmarks or making dry observations about Chicago traffic. Inside the Art Institute, they wandered through the galleries side by side. Jasmine had always loved art, and she found herself genuinely enjoying the experience, despite her companion. You like the Impressionists? Dominic observed as she lingered in front of a Monet. How can you tell? You spent 20 minutes in this section. And you get this look on your face when you're studying the brushstrokes. Jasmine felt her cheeks warm. I like how they captured light. Everything feels alive and moving. I prefer the modern wing, Dominic said. Clean lines, clear intentions, no ambiguity. That's so typical. You want everything defined and controlled. You want everything emotional and interpretive. Exactly, Jasmine smiled. See? Completely incompatible. They continued through the museum, and despite herself, Jasmine found the conversation flowing naturally. Dominic had opinions about art that were surprisingly thoughtful. He listened when she explained why certain pieces moved her. He even made her laugh with a sarcastic comment about a particularly abstract sculpture. At the museum cafe, they grabbed coffee and found a table by the window. You know, Jasmine said, stirring sugar into her cup, you're not as insufferable as I thought you'd be. High praise. You're not as dramatic as I expected. I'm not dramatic. I'm expressive. Sure. Dominic's eyes crinkled with amusement. So tell me what made you become a graphic designer? Jasmine was surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. I always loved art, but I wanted to do something practical with it. Design lets me be creative, while also solving problems for clients. What about you? Why technology? I like building things, creating systems that work efficiently. Plus, I'm good with code and terrible with people. I noticed that last part. And yet here you are, voluntarily spending time with me. Only because we have a deal, Jasmine reminded him. Right, the deal? Something in his tone made her look up. He was watching her with an expression that wasn't quite as detached as before. What? She asked. Nothing. Just thinking that this fake dating thing might not be as terrible as I thought. Jasmine felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. Don't get used to it. In 3 weeks, we're breaking up. 3 weeks, Dominic agreed, but he was smiling. As they left the museum, Dominic's hand found hers. Jasmine started to pull away, then remembered they were in public. This was part of the act, but his hand was warm, and his fingers laced through hers felt surprisingly natural. For the performance, she said quietly. For the performance, he echoed. They walked down Michigan Avenue hand in hand, and Jasmine tried to ignore how right it felt. When pretend becomes real, 3 weeks passed faster than Jasmine thought possible. What started as awkward fake dates had evolved into something she couldn't quite define. They'd been to concerts, tried new restaurants, walked along the lakefront, and somewhere along the way, the pretending had started to feel less like acting. Dominic texted her every morning, not because their mothers were watching, but just to say good morning or share a funny meme. He remembered her coffee order, her favorite bookstore. The fact that she hated cilantro, but loved spicy food. Jasmine caught herself thinking about him at random moments. The way he listened when she talked about her design projects. Really listened, offering insights that were surprisingly helpful. How he'd started volunteering at a youth coding program after she'd mentioned wanting to give back to the community. The softness in his eyes when he looked at her, when he thought she wasn't paying attention. This was not part of the plan. They were supposed to break up this week, tell their mothers it didn't work out, go back to their separate lives. Jasmine sat in her apartment on Wednesday evening staring at her phone. She'd typed and deleted 6 different text messages to Dominic. They needed to talk about ending this, but every time she tried to write the words, something stopped her. Her phone rang. Dominic's name flashed on the screen. Hey, she answered, her heart rate picking up. Hey, are you busy? Just working on some design projects? Why? Can I come over? We need to talk. Those 4 words sent panic shooting through her chest. Sure, yeah, come over. 20 minutes later, Dominic stood in her living room, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater, his hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. So he said, So, Jasmine echoed, we need to talk about the deal, right? The deal. Jasmine twisted her hands together. It's been 3 weeks. Time to break up. About that. Dominic moved closer. I don't want to. Jasmine's breath caught. I don't want to fake. Break up with you, Jasmine, because somewhere in the last 3 weeks this stopped being fake for me. Dominic, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet. Just listen. He took her hands in his. That first day, when you threw coffee on my car and called me out for being a jerk, you were right. I was being a jerk. I was angry and entitled and taking it out on everyone around me. You've changed, Jasmine said softly. Because of you. You make me want to be better. You challenge me. You don't let me get away with anything. And somehow in the middle of all this chaos, I fell in love with you. Jasmine felt tears pricking at her eyes. I fell in love with you too. I kept telling myself it was just pretend, but every time we were together it felt more real. And it terrified me. Why? Because this whole thing is crazy. We started as enemies. Our mothers set us up. We agreed to fake date to avoid disappointing them. This isn't how real relationships work. Dominic cupped her face in his hands. Who cares how it started? All that matters is where we are now. And right now I'm standing here, completely in love with you, hoping you'll give us a real chance. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Jasmine looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been afraid to admit. The warmth, the vulnerability, the genuine affection that had grown between them despite their rocky beginning. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay, let's do this. For real this time. No fake anything. Dominic smiled, that genuine smile that transformed his entire face, and kissed her. This kiss was different from the quick pecks they'd shared for their mother's benefit. This was deep and real and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. We should probably tell our mothers, Jasmine said. They're going to be insufferable. completely insufferable. I'll claim they knew all along. I'll start planning the wedding immediately. Jasmine froze. Wedding, Dominic laughed. Too soon. Way too soon. Let's just focus on being a real couple first. Deal. It's a surprise nobody expected the following Saturday. Jasmine and Dominic arrived at the Ashford estate for what they thought was a simple lunch. Instead, they walked into a house full of people, decorations, and what appeared to be a professional photographer. Surprise! Patricia and Catherine shouted in unison. "What is all this?" Jasmine asked, grabbing Dominic's hand. "We're throwing you an engagement party," Catherine squealed. "An engagement party," Dominic repeated slowly. "We're not engaged. Not yet," Patricia said with a knowing smile. "But we know you will be soon. Call it a pre-engagement party." Jasmine and Dominic looked at each other in panic. "Mom," Jasmine said carefully, "this is really sweet, but we've only been together for a month." "Actually," Dominic said quietly, "can I talk to Jasmine for a minute? Alone?" "At Jarena?" Patricia and Catherine exchanged excited glances. Dominic led Jasmine out to the terrace, away from the crowd of guests who were all watching them curiously. "This is crazy," Jasmine said. "They threw us an engagement party when we're not even engaged. We need to tell them to slow down." "Or," Dominic said, reaching into his pocket, "we could give them what they want." Right. Jasmine's eyes widened as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Dominic, what are you doing?" He dropped to one knee, and Jasmine's heart stopped. "This is not how I planned to do this," he said, looking up at her with those gray eyes that she'd fallen completely in love with. "I had this whole elaborate proposal planned for next month. Dinner at that Italian restaurant you love, rose petals, the works. But our mothers just threw us an engagement party. There are 50 people inside waiting to see what happens. And you know what? I don't care, Dominic," Jasmine whispered. "I love you, Jasmine Brooks. I love your passion and your creativity and the way you call me out when I'm being impossible. I love that you made me throw away my ideas about control and planning and let myself just feel. A month ago, you threw coffee on my car and changed my entire life. So, Jasmine, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. "This is insane. We've known each other for a month. This is the craziest thing anyone has ever asked me to do. Is that a yes?" "Yes." Jasmine laughed through her tears. "Yes, you impossible man. I'll marry you." Dominic stood and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a simple but elegant solitaire that caught the afternoon light. "How did you know my size?" "I asked your best friend Rachel last week. You were planning this?" "I told you I had a plan. This just moved up the timeline." He kissed her, and this time Jasmine didn't care who was watching. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she felt. When they finally pulled apart and walked back inside, the entire party erupted in cheers. Patricia and Catherine were crying tears of joy. Guests rushed forward to congratulate them. "I knew it," Catherine said, hugging her daughter. "From the moment I heard about you two, I knew this was meant to be." "Mother," Dominic said dryly. "You knew before we did. That's what mothers are for." Dear, the rest of the party passed in a blur of champagne toasts, congratulations, and increasingly detailed wedding planning discussions. Jasmine found herself swept along in the excitement, Dominic's hand never leaving hers. Later that evening, after all the guests had left and their mothers had finally stopped crying, Jasmine and Dominic sat on the terrace under the stars. "So," Jasmine said, leaning against his shoulder, "we're engaged." Having second thoughts? Not even a little bit. Although I reserve the right to freak out later when the reality hits, that's fair. Dominic kissed the top of her head. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "If you hadn't thrown that coffee on my car, if we hadn't both been furious and dramatic and completely impossible that day, none of this would have happened." "So you're saying the worst day of my life led to the best day of my life?" "Something like that." Jasmine turned to look at him, this man who'd gone from her worst enemy to her future husband in the span of a month. "Thank you. For what? For almost running me over? For being arrogant enough that I wanted to throw coffee on you? For agreeing to the fake dating plan? For falling in love with me somewhere along the way?" Thank you for being brave enough to call me out, for giving me a chance even when you hated me, for making me want to be the kind of man who deserves you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the Chicago skyline light up against the night sky. "When should we get married?" Jasmine asked. "Whenever you want. I'm just happy knowing I get to spend the rest of my life with you. How about next summer? That gives us time to plan something beautiful." "Next summer sounds perfect." Jasmine smiled, thinking about how impossible this all was. How their mothers had orchestrated their meeting, how they'd started as enemies, how a fake dating scheme had turned into real love. Sometimes, the best things in life happened when you stopped trying to control everything, when you let yourself be surprised, when you threw coffee on a stranger and ended up finding forever. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Dominic replied. "Even if you did ruin my favorite car." Jasmine laughed. "Get over it. You have like 10 other cars. 11. Actually, show off drama queen. Arrogant billionaire." "My arrogant billionaire," Jasmine corrected. Damn right. They kissed under the stars. Two people who had found love in the most unexpected way possible. And somewhere inside, their mothers were already planning the wedding of the century. Completely satisfied with their matchmaking skills, the coffee incident on Michigan Avenue had changed both their lives forever. Sometimes the universe had a funny way of bringing people together. Sometimes you had to almost get run over by a Tesla to find your soulmate. And sometimes, just sometimes, arranged meetings actually worked out.